community every Sunday in a state of conflict for our very souls, a state both expansively hopeful and restrictively confined. We are hopeful that we might rise to meet a new day for those who seek and who serve the Spirit, hopeful that each and every one of us might encounter the sacred within, among, and beyond every human soul, and hopeful that such an encounter might work through us to topple the idolatries of our age.
And yet, we also gather as a people who are not yet free, a people confined, unfree, contained. We are confined, unfree, contained because in this culture of division built upon the pain of the people at the margins, even the decent people hold our love too tightly. Putting it in boxes, prefacing it with qualifications like, I will love you if, I will see you if, I will hear the truth of my soul alongside you if, and only if.
You agree with me. You look like me. You stand like me. You think like me. You act like me. You sing like me. You wear your gender on your shirt, on your sleeve, and produce it upon demand. I will love you and will meet you in the sanctuary of our hearts, if and only if you give me evidence of your good liberal virtues, if and only if you never fail to speak the language of the movement and never weep upon a street corner out of grief for your sheer inadequacy and the vastness of the struggle that you cannot even name.
We are imprisoned by these ifs and these only ifs. We are confined by the smallness of our loving, even as our souls remind us that we can only get free if we all get free together. And so today, as we intersect in honest work, let our hopefulness mingle with our conviction. Let our willingness to be honest about the hardest questions open us to new truths.
May there truly be more love, with no labels and no binary, no preface and no qualification, and no arithmetic and no limit. May there be more love to liberate us all, and may we keep on today and every day until we find it and share it, inch by precious inch, with one another and the world.
Walk together, children, don't you get too weary. Walk together, children, don't you get too weary. Walk together, children, don't you get too weary. There's a great coming in the promised land. Walk together, children, don't you get too weary. Walk together, children, don't you get too weary. Walk together, children, don't you get too weary. There's a great coming in the promised land. Talk together, children, don't you get too weary. Talk together, children, don't you get too weary. Talk together, children, don't you get too weary. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Sing and never tire. Sing and never tire. Sing and never tire. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Sing together, children, don't you get too weary. Sing together, children, don't you get too weary. Sing together, children, don't you get too weary. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Shout together, children, don't you get too weary. Shout together, children, don't you get too weary. Shout together, children, don't you get too weary. There's a great meeting, there's a promised land. Sing and never tire. Sing and never tire. Sing and never tire. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Talk together, children, don't you get too weary. Talk together, children, don't you get too weary. Sing together, children, don't you get too weary. Shout together, children, don't you get too weary. Walk together, children, don't you get too weary. Talk together, children, don't you get too weary. There's a great meeting in the promised land. There's a great meeting in the promised land. There's a great together, children, don't you get too weary. Together, children, in the promised land. There's a great together, children, in the promised land. There's a great together, children, in the promised land. There's a great keep on walking. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on walking. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on singing. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on shouting. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on walking. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on walking. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on singing. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on shouting. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Keep on walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Sing and never tire. Sing and never tire. Sing and never tire. There's a great meeting in the promised land. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Sing together, children, don't you get weary. Shout together, children, don't you get weary. Walk.
Lulu, the One and Only, by Lynette Mahiney, illustrated by Jenny Poe. My name is Luluwa Lovington, but everyone calls me Lulu. It means pearl in Arabic. Mama tells me you are unique and gorgeous, just like a black pearl. She wears these beautiful earrings all the time. They're from her mother in Kenya. My big brother's name is Zane, and it means gift. He is silly, and he makes me laugh a lot. Being in a part black and part white family seems to confuse people around us. They say a lot of mean things to us because they think we don't fit in. Kids tease Zane. You're the blackest guy on the team. The coach is really your dad? When I play in the park, the other moms always think Mama is my sitter. What do you charge? We are looking for one. When I'm out with Daddy, some people think I'm adopted. That's so nice that you gave her a good home. Where did she come from? Everyone else might be confused, but I'm not. I love our family. But being a mix of Mama and Daddy always brings around that question. I hate that question. What are you? What are you? So, what are you? What are you? What are you? Zane, do people ever ask you what you are? Yeah, it's annoying. But that's when I use my power phrase. Your power phrase? It helps people understand who you are, not what you are. I'm proud of our family, and that I'm brown. But I am more than my skin. I want people to know what's inside me too. When I get that question, I tell people, I'm magic, made from my parents. Dad taught me how to play hockey, and I love to study space because of Mom. You know how good I am at so many things? Mom and Dad have a ton to do with that. Wow, Zane is really smart. Now I need a power phrase too, and I need it fast. But how do I find my power phrase? The question is not what I am, but who I am. I'm a good singer. I am fast and strong. I am loving and kind. I am a black pearl, unique and gorgeous. I've got to get this right. The next day, Billy asked me, "Hey Lulu, what are you?" It was time. I'm Lulu Lovington, the one and only. Cool, said Billy. Do you like to sing? We sat together at lunch and sang our favorite songs. The real treasure is inside, just like an oyster holds a pearl, and just like me. Lulu Lovington, the one and only. Today in our story, Lulu and her family experienced many microaggressions. Eventually, with the help of her brother Zane, Lulu was able to figure out a creative way to deal with one particular microaggression. I wonder, though, what would have happened if Lulu and her family had called out the microaggressions that they experienced? I wonder, have you ever been called out for committing a microaggression? I wonder, how should we respond when someone tells us what we've said or done was hurtful?
It is our tradition each week to honor the joys and sorrows that have entered our hearts in the time since we were last together. We do this by dropping a stone in water. The stone represents the particular joy or sorrow or experience that's happened to us. The water represents the healing powers of the earth and of the universe. This particular water is special in that it contains a drop of water that was blessed by this congregation beginning back in 2018. Every year when we are together, we add to it. As you can imagine, our water supply is dwindling because we have not been able to be together yet during this church year. And we look forward to all being together again so that we can bless another gallon. It also seems that in this time, a gallon is not enough because there is so much still happening in our world that leaves us heartbroken and sad. Lulu's experiences in our story are not just a story. They are real life experiences. So we drop a stone in water for all the Lulus, for all the people who have experienced microaggressions and oppressions this week, just because of who they are. We drop a stone for those in Texas and the Mid-South region who continue to suffer from the ravages of the winter storm that came through there, for the many who still do not have power, for those who have suffered home damage, and for those who now face flooding issues. We drop a stone for the more than 500,000 people who have died of the coronavirus and the many, many, many thousands of people who've been sickened with it and who remain hospitalized today. And finally, we drop a stone for all of our other hurts and sorrows, all of those feelings that have left us feeling crestfallen, all of those things that make us shed a tear in sorrow. We also recognize our joys this week. We remember that despite all of the problems of our world, there are still moments of goodness. There are still moments of kindness in our world. There are still people falling in love and getting married and getting new jobs and getting back on their feet. There are still babies being born. There are still so many things for which we can be grateful. For those we have named, and for those whose names we do not know, and for those whose names are carefully guarded in our hearts, we drop yet one more stone, in the hope that this healing water will soften the sorrows and amplify our joys. At this time, I'd like to show you a photograph and ask that you meditate with me on it. Join me in a moment of silent meditation, reflection, or prayer as we contemplate this image. Lord, Lord, open unto me. A prayer by Howard Thurman. Open unto me light for my darkness. Open unto me courage for my fear. Open unto me hope for my despair. Open unto me peace for my turmoil. Open unto me joy for my sorrow. Open unto me strength for my weakness. Open up to me wisdom for my confusion. Open unto me forgiveness for my sins. Open unto me tenderness for my toughness. Open unto me love for my hates. Open unto me thyself for myself. Lord, Lord, open unto me.
I feel so lost sometimes. If you trust me, I'll set you free from all your doubts. But I'll never know, never find who you are if you don't. Open your heart to me. Let me in, let me try, let me feel all your love. Open your heart to me. I'll never know, never find who you are if you don't. Open your heart to me. Let me in, let me try, let me feel all your love. Open your heart to me. Open your heart to me. Open your heart to me.
Giving to First Church is easy, and we make it as easy as possible to encourage you to support the work that this community does both inside and outside the walls of this church. This month, as we do every month, we have identified an organization to support with our Share the Plate collection program. For the month of February, the funds collected will go to the Interfaith Hospitality Network, which helps those who are unhoused in the Cincinnati area, giving them the support that they need to recover and get back on their feet. If you'd like to contribute to IHN or to First Church, you may do so by texting the word GIVE to 513-717-7373. If you have access to our Breeze member system, by clicking the Give Now link. You may donate online at firstuu.com or by mailing a check to 536 Linton Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45219. If you'd like to designate your gift for IHN, please indicate that in the online drop-down box or by writing it in the memo line of your check. Again, we are grateful for your contributions to the work of First Church, but if this is your first time visiting, we invite you to let the virtual offering plate pass you by. Your presence is your gift to us. Our offering will now be gratefully received.
Well, you better listen, my sisters and brothers, 'cause if you do, you can hear there are voices still calling across the years, and they're all crying across the ocean, and they're crying across the land, and they will till we all come to understand. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us on chain. None of us are free. And there are people still in darkness, and they just can't see the light. If you don't say it's wrong, then that says it's right. We got to try to feel for each other. Let our brothers know that we care. Got to get the message, send it out loud and clear. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us on chain. None of us are free. Now I swear your salvation isn't too hard to find. None of us can find it on our own. We've got to join together and every soul who's suffering will know that we're not alone. Oh, none of us are free. None of us are free, y'all. None of us are free, and one of us are chained. None of us are free. If you just look around you, you're gonna see what I said. 'Cause the world is getting smaller each passing day. Now it's time to start making changes, and it's time for us all to realize that the truth is shining bright right before our eyes. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free, and one of us is chained. None of us are free. Oh, none of us are free. Oh, my. None of us are free. No, none of us are free, and one of us is chained. One of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. The one of us is chained. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. No. None of us are free. One of us is chained. Oh Lord. None of us are free. Oh Lord. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free.
Opening hearts at First Church. What on earth does that mean? Well, I want to take you back in time a couple of years. It doesn't seem possible that it's been 2 years ago. To 2018, when I accepted the call to be your minister. That fall, we had what's known as an onboarding workshop. And we invited all the members of the church to come in on a Friday night and had pizza. And we laughed and we got to know each other and we talked about what we want First Church to be in 5 or 10 years. What do we want it to look like? Well, everybody talked about how active we are in our community. And still, the number one thing people wanted was for this congregation to be more diverse, to more accurately reflect the demographics of the neighborhood in which it sits. We drew pictures of what we thought the church would look like in 5 or 10 years. We hung them around the building. We showed them as part of worship. We had them up here on the stage behind me. And now, it's February 28th, 2021. I'm standing in an almost empty sanctuary. And even if it were filled, I'm not sure that it would reflect what was in those drawings. That's opening hearts at First Church. It's the work that we decided we needed to do back in 2018 to open the doors of the church, to open our individual hearts, to be more inclusive of those who don't look like, don't sound like, don't have the same values, don't sing the same way, don't talk the same way, don't have the same education as those who have been here for a very long time and those who came before. Opening Hearts is an initiative of the Board of Trustees and the ministry of this church to become more inclusive and more welcoming in everything we do. And as you've no doubt heard me say many times, if you know me, the work has to start on the inside.
It can't start on the outside. How do we relate to one another? How do we relate to strangers? Are we kind? Are we open-hearted? Do we greet them in such a way that recognizes their inherent worth and dignity? Do we interact with them in a way that shows that we believe that they are all part of an interconnected web with us? Do we really treat them in a way that says that none of us are free if one is still in chains? That's the work of opening hearts. To work on making sure that we are doing our personal work so that we can do the work that our world so desperately needs. And we're doing that in several areas, and you're going to hear about those a little bit later, but they are accessibility and inclusion, classism, LGBTQ plus welcoming, racism, and multiculturalism. We need this work now more than ever. More than ever. At a time when our country seems more divided than ever, although there are signs maybe we're turning the corner, but we're not there yet. At a time when the pandemic keeps us apart and is straining relationships and limiting our ability to truly interact with one another. At a time when killings continue. At a time when people continue to struggle more than ever economically, psychologically, financially, heartfully. We need this work now more than ever to help us open our hearts, not just for our vision of First Church, but for our vision of the world. Because remember, none of us are free until all of us are free.
This church year, from last July to date, has been appalling when looking through our opening hearts lens of racism and white supremacy. I could do the litany: police shootings, unemployment, and eviction for the marginalized while the rich get richer. Rising white nationalism. I don't need to describe it. We have all lived it. The fact of and the presence of systemic white supremacy could not be more clearly seen than it is today. Through this year, our opening hearts pillar of racism and white supremacy has continued its important efforts. First Church's efforts with voter registration and GOTV was remarkable, particularly in the face of the risks of the pandemic. More important to our response to the shift in the conditions of our world is our year of discovery. How do we want to be with one another? How do we hold one another? How do we sustain it? The UUA Commission on Institutional Change has presented its work analysis of structural, systemic racism and white supremacy culture within our First Church community. It recommends institutional change to our governance, to our work inside and outside our church, to our stewardship, and to our conflict resolution. Monthly, we are diving deeply into these questions with sessions on each of this report's sections. We are examining the elements of racism and our ability to recognize it. We are learning to be supportive of the marginalized by understanding the tension between waiting and the sense of urgency felt by those who are victims of racism. Also, through our Board of Trustees, we are rewriting our bylaws. We are examining our covenant of right relations. We are re-examining how we think about stewardship in our annual fundraising canvas. Also this year, we have encouraged the reading of An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. The book spans centuries of resistance by more than 500 federally recognized nations in the U.S. Its account of the country's evolution remains gripping, tightly written, and packed with facts traditional textbooks and historical accounts neglect to cover. In our future, the continuation of Widening the Circle of Concern with its monthly message by Reverend Connie from the Sunday pulpit and its follow-up workshop on the third Wednesday of each month through May. We meet in the evening at 7 p.m. by Zoom. Invitations are in your inbox each month. We are encouraging the common read, Breathe, A Letter to My Sons, by Imani Perry. It is a powerful meditation on racial disparity, community culture, history, and hope. Imani Perry breathes life into her musings about parenting children in an unjust world, and into the worries surrounding her two sons and what it means to be a Black person in America. In May of 2017, 2/3 of UU congregations engaged in a white supremacy teaching. We will be revisiting that work in May with our white supremacy teaching. White supremacy is the idea that white people are better and more deserving of wealth, power, and privilege than people of color. It is a self-perpetuating system that continues to fuel oppressions and inequities even in our church community. The teach-in will expose the impact of white supremacy culture in our midst, engage us to find change, and help us partner for action. Today is the last day of Black History Month. I hope that you watched The Black Church on PBS and some of the other great PBS programming, Freedom Summer and How It Feels to Be Free, to name a couple. February has also the sign-up period for Beloved Conversation, the FA Collaborative at Meadville Lombard Theological School's program for Unitarian Universalists seeking to embody racial justice as a spiritual practice. In its online interactional series of workshops to heal the impact of racism on our lives in order to get free together. Unfortunately, registration for the spring session closed just a few days ago. Watch for the fall session. Our Opening Hearts efforts on racism and white supremacy continue. As we do so, we will also join the efforts of some congregations of the UUA in examining and reconsidering support for the adoption of the eighth principle. The eighth principle says, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, and to promote our acting accountably in order to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. This deserves all our attention as we approach General Assembly. Opening Hearts hopes that its future programs will continue to enable your positive contact with a troubled world.
Opening Hearts is a necessary effort to make changes that help people feel less marginalized. Opening Hearts is also important because it was actually requested by UU leaders and members across the country who consider themselves part of groups that are historically excluded. Along with the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, Opening Hearts guides us as we work to deal with the impact of implicit biases, to address oppressions, and to decenter whiteness and other dominant cultures. Opening Hearts is an important step that is consistent with our proposed 8th principle of Unitarianism that holds us accountable to consciously work to end racism and other oppressions in our congregations and in society at large.
Opening Hearts is important because it helps make sure that our church is ready to be part of contemporary conversations and part of our contemporary world, so that we can attract contemporary young families for whom this language and way of thinking may already be a part of their life, and they want to see it reflected in the moral world where they raise their children, which is our church. So I hope you give it a shot and see what you can learn.
We need to continue opening hearts, because it's not enough just to be liberal and polite. We need to understand each other's culture in a way that we don't see it filtered through our own unconscious bias, and that takes work. Please join us.
The importance of doing the work of opening hearts at First Church. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called upon to seek universal justice and equity for all, and we are challenged to actively engage in undoing the marginalization of all people. Several years ago, with support of the board, members, and staff, First Church inaugurated its Opening Hearts program with 5 strong pillars of focus: racism, ableism, classism, LGBTQ, and multiculturalism. The Opening Hearts program is a pathway for each member to begin, or in many cases, continue the work of dismantling the burdens of each pillar. Opening Hearts is a process to establish an anti-racism, anti-oppression, multiculturalism team for our congregation. Each member of the Opening Hearts team took one of these pillars to begin to define the focus of their work. We have all seen firsthand the effects of this work with sermons, workshops, changes in the physical environment, common readings, discussions, anti-oppression work, and many other common experiences. It is important to note that, at some point, the work of all of these pillars will intersect with each other and amplify the interconnectedness of Opening Hearts work. We have spiritual practices to help us deal with the uncertainty this work will rise in each of us, and we have our faith traditions that will keep us rooted as we examine our discomfort and the anxiety which we will experience. We also have the assurance that our faith, our love, and our relationships will grow as a congregation as we move through these experiences. For me personally, Opening Hearts has often been the ongoing platform for learning, examining, analyzing, acknowledging, and taking responsibility for my own prejudices, my privilege, stereotyping, biases, and my microaggressions. The work is hard and fatiguing, but knowing that I have the support of my church in doing this work is comforting. And so we ask ourselves, why is it important that we continue to do this work? I say, make a pact with yourself that justice, equality, and inclusion for all people can only be achieved if we look at our whiteness, our privilege, and our biases and know that these exist at someone else's expense. By doing the work, you are guaranteed that your perception of the world will change. In many ways, changing your perception of cultural oppression will unburden you and allow for new experiences. Once I embraced the work that I needed to do, it was clear that doing the work would be my spiritual pathway for many years to come. This is not a short-term endeavor, but it is life-changing. Be brave, be the change, do the work, do the deep dive, experience your epiphanies, take away your helplessness, expand your hopefulness and joy. This journey will give you, and we will grow personally and as a congregation. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Rohr, and I represent the Accessibility and Inclusion Ministry Team, also known as the AIM Team. Our goal is to help our congregation be more welcoming towards people with physical and mental disabilities. This year has been hard on everyone and has taught us about the challenges and opportunities experienced during COVID. For example, moving everything to virtual gatherings has allowed people with mobility issues to join more easily. However, it has caused some problems for people who are not as technically savvy. This year of COVID has also taught us about patience and gratitude. Before everything shut down, the AIM team did a survey of our church building and identified some capital improvement priorities. I am so grateful to the building and grounds team for including several of our requests in the security grant they received. They are working hard to implement these changes in our church while everything is shut down. Here is where the patience part comes in. As with a lot of construction projects, there have been some delays. The ramp to be installed at the northeast side of our sanctuary has run into some problems. The city gave a lot more requirements for the work to be up to code, raising the costs dramatically. They are currently reviewing how to proceed. Another capital request was the installation of a push button on the front doors to make them open automatically. These doors are being replaced with bulletproof glass, and Buildings and Grounds needs to see how heavy those doors will be before they can install the door opener. A third request was to lower the doorbell. This is also on hold. Because outside cameras are scheduled to be installed, they need to see where these cameras will point before moving the doorbell. This way they can make sure that the person ringing the bell will actually be visible. I look forward to seeing the progress and continuing the work in our congregation in small and large ways to become more welcoming to everyone.
When Lois and I first started attending church here, I was the president of the Teachers Union. I also had a long history in the city's labor movement, having been a rank-and-file activist in the United Steelworkers Union and a member of the Cincinnati Labor Council. Shortly after we decided to join First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati, a longtime friend came up to me and said, "Be careful with that church. You could lose your working-class street credibility." I laughed it off as a good joke, but I too knew that this church had the reputation in our community of being the high church Unitarian congregation in Cincinnati, and that did not necessarily mean that we were attractive to working-class people. Our Universalist heritage and history, which is much more oriented toward the lives of lower-class people like myself, wasn't even on my radar screen at the time. Someone else said that when they visited our church, they felt that the people here were more like Trader Joe's kind of people. They didn't feel like that they fit in because they were more like an Aldi's kind of person. Now, perceptions of class are not always accurate, but they do have some basis in reality. Whether we think about ourselves this way or not doesn't really matter, because in the eyes of some Cincinnatians, there is a perception out there that ordinary folks or working class folks would not be truly welcome or equal members in our congregation. It is time for us to think about how our church represents itself to the rest of the world. This is not about our theology. Our Unitarian Universalist theology is very attractive to people from all backgrounds and abilities. What is not attractive is our struggle to be the embodiment of our theology. We can so easily portray ourselves as people who are in charge and super organized with all the answers. That can be a huge turnoff for people who take a risk and find themselves at our front door because they are drawn to what we profess to believe. This is what our Opening Hearts efforts are all about. We want to break through the barriers of class, culture, ability, and identity to create a faith community that announces to the world that we are a justice-seeking community open to all people, sharing the same unanswered questions, hopes, fears, and aspirations. We need to figure out as many ways as possible to let the rest of the world know that that is who we are.
When somebody questions their personal sexual identity or gender identity, they most often also are questioning their spiritual identity. Is my sexual or gender variance actually a deviance? Am I still a good, worthwhile, honorable person? Those are the kinds of questions that the LGBTQ+ team of Opening Hearts have tried to work with this year. We've tried to take a spiritual approach, and with COVID, it's been a challenge. We had several things planned for this year. Some have proceeded, some haven't. We had a workshop planned on welcoming trans persons to churches. And that was not just our church, it was churches across town. The workshop has been delayed, but it has not been deterred. We are still planning on having that workshop when COVID lets up some and we can gather together in person. OWL was a casualty of COVID in the past year. Our sexuality education program for our youth needed to be canceled. The Pride Parade for the second year in a row this June is being canceled, but we will be there in 2022. On a broader scale, COVID has impacted financial hardships on LGBTQ persons disproportionately to the rest of the population. 64% of LGBTQ households in our nation have experienced job loss in the last year. It's more than that, much more than that, for LGBTQ households of color. It's in the 90 percentiles. And how does that compare to non-LGBTQ households? It's 45%. There are things that our LGBTQ team are asking you to do because we know we can do them. We're asking you to stand up and defy COVID. Things you can do. Check online, it's easy. At Lighthouse Youth Services, they have a 36-page current directory of mental services, health services, education, social services within the greater Cincinnati area. Another place to check online is the Transgender Health Clinic of Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. That group has done breakthrough national research on the importance of spirituality to youth who are facing gender identity questions. And their website has superb information for families and parents who are trying to guide their children through questioning their own gender identity. Also check out UU.com. You may not know it, but the UUA has some of the best materials in the United States, and they have information related to spiritual practices. And for those of you who want to keep up on advocacy programs, Equality Ohio's website and also the Human Rights Campaign website can tell you what's going on nationally in Ohio and Kentucky or right in your own hometown. And finally, something everybody can do right now is to help these organizations stay active. They have all been impacted and had to have staff cutbacks due to COVID. So in conclusion, the LGBTQ+ team of Opening Hearts wants to remind us that we are all Unitarian Universalists, and what that means is that we open our hearts to people of all gender and sexual identities. So take the advice of Dr. Glenn Rideout in the music this morning. Don't tire, keep singing, always on the side of love.
I know that our community's focus on opening hearts is important to First Church's future growth and our social justice outreach. As important as that sounds in the middle of this worship service, it's not what motivates me. Like many of you, I am seriously aggravated by many of the outrageous things our society is perpetrating on the people around us. It is easy, maybe even a little piously comfortable, to get angry and rage at the stupid and inhumane things people do to each other. When it comes to the frustration of living in this kind of society, I seem always to be less angry and frustrated when I work at an activity that engages me directly on the problems that disturb me. I have heard, and I believe, that this culture of empty-headed and sometimes vicious violence is the water that I swim in. Our Opening Hearts work forces me to be personally involved in the issues that aggravate me every day. It makes me look inward and find my behaviors and my biases that feed the stupidity that I rail at. It challenges me to expand my sense of personal connectedness to my world. It connects my behaviors to those behaviors that I want changed in my world. Our Opening Hearts enables me to let go of some of my anger and replace it with the empathy and compassion for those who cross my conceived line of social appropriateness.
Multiculturalism may be the least specifically defined of the areas we've targeted through our Opening Hearts initiatives. We often think of multiculturalism in terms of national or regional cultural characteristics, but in fact, every group, large or small, from schools and social groups to churches and stores, has unique cultural elements. Perspectives on the group, its participants, and ways of conducting itself are unique. Think, for example, of our board of trustees, individual committees, small groups, as many cultures. As we look at First Church, we see that we share a common culture as a community, but that community is comprised of multiple subcultures, characteristics, and individuals. Our challenge as a congregation is to recognize and maintain the positive characteristics of each, while ensuring that cultural aspects that may be disparaging of or hurtful of another are minimized. Some areas that we need to examine together include perceptions of older and younger members, education level or financial difference, and differences in political views, theology, or religious beliefs. This is about ensuring that people who represent varied cultures feel respected and valued at First Church. This is about ensuring that they feel welcome in becoming active participants in our community. Our UU principles are about welcoming all who share these principles, our covenant, and our mission. It is about ensuring that all who seek a community reflecting these shared values are accepted, respected, and embraced. Again, consider our mission to welcome all with love, support learning and spiritual growth, serve our wider community, and work for justice, equity, and inclusion. How do we ensure that we are welcoming, respectful, and embracing of all types of diversity outside our First Church community as well? In the words of Justice Advocate Brian Stevenson, quote, "Get proximate," unquote. This means to be with people who are different from yourself and to listen to them describe their needs and desires, and to work together to determine actions to take along with our neighbors in South Avondale, Cincinnati, and the wider world. We are all enriched by living in a diverse, multicultural community. Doing this requires that we be open to new ways of looking at things and being in relationship. Successful multicultural communities require a shared vision with intentional plan and commitment. As a congregation, we must open our hearts to one another and live what we believe both within and outside of First Church. Thank you all for your willingness to do the work to truly open your hearts.
As we prepare to close our service, we do so with this benediction. May we all be encouraged. May we all be brave. May we all be committed to doing the work of opening hearts, of welcoming all who come through our doors, of loving all who come into our lives, of opening our hearts to life itself. And with that, we extinguish our chalice as we do every week by reading the words that appear on the screen. Together we say, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we hold in our hearts until we are together again. That concludes the worship portion of our service. And I'd like to share with you some news of our community. First, we extend a warm welcome to Kenny Hopgood, our new First Church custodian. Kenny joined us earlier this month on the day that the snow fell. We are so glad to have him as part of our community, and we look forward to having you meet him in person. Also, we have some exciting events coming up this week. It's not on the screen, but our bylaws forums are continuing. There are 2 this week, one on Monday evening and one on Saturday morning. If you'd like more information on how to join these forums, please send an email to member-care@firstuu.com. We also will be having today, right after service, coffee hour, where you can join us on Zoom for conversation and connection. Our members of our Board of Trustees will be online to host First Sunday conversations. This is a chance for you to ask any question of our board that you may have. On Thursday evening, we have Getting to Know UUs. This is the second of 2 membership classes that we have. The first one is Getting to Know You, and this one is Getting to Know UUs, where you get to learn more about Unitarian Universalism and First Church in particular. We have several faith development activities that are ongoing. Wednesday night is cartoons. Thursday night story time, and this Friday night is a TAD talk. Saturday mornings, as always, are Minecraft. Next week's service is This Little Light. This is the kickoff of our fiscal year 22 pledge campaign, and we'll be talking about how one little light can be part of a brighter flame that can change the world. Please join us for that service featuring our First Church house band. Also, we will have our Widening the Circle of Concern service. The March service will be about widening the circle of concern, centering those who serve. It'll be followed by a discussion group on the third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. For any of the events that are listed here, if you'd like more information, please send an email to member-care@firstuu.com.